A salvage yard of possibilities. Terran Shivers stood at the edge of the Alexandria salvage yard, his silhouette framed by the fiery orange hues of the setting binary suns. The two suns dipped lower in the sky, casting a long, eerie glow over the expanse of the cosmic junkyard. The smell of metal, old circuits, and the sharp, pungent scent of ozone filled the air as he surveyed the endless sea of wrecked starships and discarded alien technology stretching as far as the eye could see. To the untrained eye, it was nothing but a wasteland, an unkempt graveyard where forgotten technology went to die. But to Terran, it was a kingdom of possibilities, each broken piece a potential treasure, each malfunctioning gadget a chance to make something incredible. The sun's light bounced off the jagged hulls of starships from 100 different species, their once glowing exteriors now dulled and faded from years of neglect. A scavenger's paradise. Terran adjusted his leather jacket, the wind rustling through his tousled light brown hair, and sighed. The salvage yard was quiet tonight, the hum of distant machines, and the occasional clank of debris, the only sounds. It was a welcome break from the usual frenzy of business, where everything seemed to move at breakneck speed. Here, in this graveyard of discarded dreams, Terran could take his time. His eyes fell on his current project, the latest addition to his already overflowing collection, a quantum stabilizer, a piece of technology the size of a bread box. Its surface was covered in scorch marks and cracks. It looked like it had been through hell, maybe even blown up once or twice. But if Terran could repair it, it could fetch a fortune. If he wasn't careful, though, the stabilizer could explode in a violent burst of energy that would level half the yard. He liked it that way. There was something thrilling about working with alien tech, something dangerously intoxicating in the unpredictable mix of potential success and utter catastrophe. "Sir, you really shouldn't be here after hours," came a melodic voice from behind him. Terran froze for a split second before turning, his practiced smile sliding easily into place. But when his eyes landed on the speaker, the smile faltered, just for a moment. Standing before him was an alien woman, hovering effortlessly in a sleek, advanced hoverchair. Her green skin shimmered faintly in the dimming light, almost luminescent in the growing shadows of the yard. Long violet hair cascaded over her shoulders, a sharp contrast to the black corset-style top she wore, which accentuated her sharp, defined features. Terran's breath caught in his throat. She was stunning, not just in her beauty, but in the strength that radiated from her every movement. She wasn't just any inventory specialist. She was someone who had lived through her own battles. "I could say the same to you," he replied smoothly, recovering quickly. "But then again, neither of us seems particularly concerned with rules, do we?" Her lips curved into a smile, one that was both amused and knowing, as though she had anticipated his reaction. "I'm Nera Laveri," she said, introducing herself with the kind of grace that felt effortless. "The yard's new inventory specialist. And you, I presume, are Terran Shivers, the human who keeps submitting ridiculously lowball bids on our most dangerous salvage." Karen's grin widened at her sharpness. "Guilty as charged," he said with a mock bow. "But I prefer the term innovative procurement specialist." She raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed, though her smile lingered. "Is that what we're calling scripyard scavengers these days?" Terran couldn't help but laugh, shaking his head in mock disbelief. "What's the fun in calling it scavenging? It's all about finding hidden treasures in the wreckage." Nera. She eyed him with a cool, Terran didn't back off. He approached her hoverchair with professional interest, crouching beside it to take a closer look. "Compensators running hot," he muttered, his fingers lightly brushing the housing. "Primary coils misaligned. It's an easy fix, but—" He stopped mid-sentence, noticing something in her posture. "But it's probably been like this for a while." Nera's gaze didn't waver, but there was a shift in her expression. "You're not the first person to notice," she replied dryly. "But I'm not asking for a fix." Terran paused, his fingers still on the chair. "No, I didn't think you were. but I'm offering one anyway." He straightened up, pulling a multi-tool from his jacket pocket. "Standard procedure. You don't fix things you're not supposed to. But this isn't some standard issue tech. I'll have this working better than new in no time." Nera's lips parted, almost in surprise. "You don't mind breaking a few rules, do you?" Terran flashed her a mischievous grin, his hands already working on the compensator. "Lady, you don't know the half of it." As he worked in comfortable silence, Nera seemed to relax, her posture shifting slightly as she watched him. There was something about the way he moved, fluid and confident, that intrigued her. Most people would have hesitated, even outright refused to meddle with something as delicate as her hoverchair. But this human, this Terran Shivers, was different. His fingers moved with a kind of calm precision, not rushing but focused on the task at hand. There was no fear, no hesitation. And for some reason, that gave her a strange sense of hope. After a few minutes, Terran stepped back with a satisfied grunt. "There. That should do it," he said, wiping his hands on his jacket. "All aligned and calibrated. If I did it right, that chair of yours should feel like it's running on a fresh power core." Nera's eyes flicked to the chair's control panel, which now showed a steady green light. She hesitated for a moment before slowly powering it up. The chair hummed to life with a smoother, more efficient vibration, and she felt the weight of the compensator adjust with ease. Her lips twitched, the faintest hint of a smile appearing at the corner of her mouth. "Impressive," she said quietly, her voice softer than before. Terran straightened, his playful grin returning. "I like to think so," he replied. "So no more getting stuck in this junkyard for you." For a moment, Nera's gaze softened, and she met his eyes with something akin to gratitude. Or was it curiosity? "Maybe not," she said, her tone thoughtful. "But this yard still has a lot to teach me. Maybe you're right about finding treasures in the wreckage." Terran chuckled. "You'd be surprised how much you can find if you're willing to look closely enough." He turned to walk away, but then glanced back at her. "If you ever need more repairs, or hell, anything, don't hesitate to ask." Nera watched him go, a strange feeling settling in her chest. There was something in his demeanor, his ability to fix things both mechanical and emotional, that made her wonder if she hadn't been wrong all these years. Maybe some things could be fixed after all. Maybe even herself. Unlikely allies. As Terran walked back through the labyrinth of the salvage yard, his mind wandered back to the encounter with Nera. There was something about her, something beyond her striking appearance, and the smooth way she carried herself in that hoverchair. He couldn't quite place it, but he felt like he had just uncovered a layer of something deep beneath the surface of her hardened exterior. It wasn't just the chair that had been broken. There was more to her story, and he was starting to suspect it was a story worth learning. The yard was beginning to quiet down. As the last rays of the twin suns dipped behind the distant mountains, the chill of the night crept in, accompanied by the low hum of idle machinery. Terran's thoughts returned to the quantum stabilizer he had been working on earlier. That was his bread and butter, the high-risk, high-reward tech he'd become notorious for handling. But something felt different about tonight. There was a shift in the air, as if something larger was about to unfold. He had always been the lone wolf, a scavenger, a loner in the vast sea of star systems. But now, for the first time in years, he couldn't shake the feeling that he might need a partner. It was an unsettling thought. He was used to relying on himself, using his own instincts to navigate the dangers of alien technology. But there was something about Nera, her quiet strength, her resilience, that made him wonder if they might make a good team. She clearly had a sharp mind, a far cry from the typical people he encountered in the salvage business. Maybe, just maybe, they could help each other. As he reached his makeshift workshop at the far end of the yard, he began tinkering with the stabilizer again, his hands moving mechanically as his thoughts stayed with Nera. He found himself thinking about her story, her time in that hoverchair, the accident, and the years of recovery that followed. No doubt, it had shaped her into someone who was fiercely independent, yet still carrying a silent weight of sorrow and frustration. The sudden sound of a soft hum broke him out of his reverie. Turning toward the entrance of his workshop, he saw Nera approaching, her hover chair gliding effortlessly over the rough terrain. He straightened up, wiping his hands on a rag and watching as she neared. There was something about her, the way she moved in the chair now, that seemed different, lighter, more at ease. "You came back," Terran said, surprised at the words as they left his mouth. Nera smiled slightly, the expression softer than it had been earlier. "You didn't think I'd let you off that easily, did you?" Her voice was still steady, but now there was a trace of warmth in it. "I've been thinking. You fixed my chair, but you didn't just fix it. You made it work better than it ever did before." Terran leaned against his workbench, trying to hide the pleased grin that tugged at his lips. "I aim to please," he said, though there was a hint of pride in his tone. "Didn't think you'd be back so soon, though. I figured you'd be off to find something else to fix." She tilted her head slightly, her violet hair catching the fading light. "Maybe. But there's something I wanted to ask you. Something that's been bothering me." Terran raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "You've got my attention." Nera paused, clearly gathering her thoughts before continuing. "It's about the work you do here. The tech you fix. I saw the quantum stabilizer earlier. That thing's dangerous. If it blows, it could take out half the yard." Terran chuckled softly. "That's the fun of it. You never really know if it's going to blow, or if it's going to turn into something useful. But that's the thrill of working with alien tech. There's no manual, no guarantees." "Yeah, well, I've been thinking about the work I do too," Nera said, her tone growing more serious. "Before I came here, I worked with a lot of people in similar conditions. Folks who had injuries, lost limbs, had to rely on tech to keep going. But you don't just fix them. You don't just slap a new part on and expect things to work. I've seen that before. It's not just the machine that's broken. It's the person too." Terran felt a shift in the air. The weight of her words was heavier than he expected. He pushed off from the bench and stepped closer to her, his curiosity piqued. "You're talking about something else, not just the chair. What is it you want to fix, Nera?" Nera didn't immediately respond. Instead, she looked down at the ground, as though searching for the right words. For a moment, Terran thought she might leave, but then she spoke quietly, her voice tinged with vulnerability. "My legs," she said softly. "They're not just mechanical. They're a constant reminder of my accident. Every time I move, I'm reminded that I'm not whole, that I'll never be the same. The compensator helps, but it's just a bandage. I've been in this chair for over a decade, but I've never felt free." Terran studied her for a long moment. He had known people with similar injuries, seen the toll it took on their bodies, their confidence, but he never quite realized the emotional weight of it. The parts she spoke of, the pain, the feeling of being trapped in a body that no longer worked the way it should, hit him in a way he hadn't anticipated. He took a breath and nodded slowly. "I can help you with that. Fixing your legs. I've worked with prosthetics before. Nothing like yours, but I think I can make something that'll work better for you. We could add enhancements, make them lighter, stronger. But that's not all of it, is it? You want more than just new legs. You want to feel whole again." Nera's eyes met his, the vulnerability now laid bare. She didn't answer immediately, but the expression on her face said more than words ever could. There was a quiet acceptance in her gaze, as if she was finally ready to take a leap into the unknown. "What would it take?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Terran smiled, a spark of determination in his eyes. "It'll take time, patience, and a hell of a lot of work. But I'm willing to help you, Nera. We'll do this right." A long pause hung in the air, thick with the weight of the promise he had just made. Nera's hover chair hummed quietly, the only sound in the quiet yard. But in that moment, Terran knew that this wasn't just another project. This was something far more personal, something that could change both their lives. The first step toward rebuilding. The following days were a whirlwind of activity. Terran and Nera had begun their work in earnest, though they had hardly spoken of what lay ahead. There were no promises made beyond the task at hand. Terran spent his days scouring the salvage yard for parts, often venturing deep into the wreckage to retrieve the rare materials needed to make the custom enhancements Nera would require. There was no shortage of alien tech here, but finding the right parts, the ones that would make a difference, was an entirely different matter. Every time Terran looked at Nera, he saw the same mix of determination and doubt in her eyes. She was willing to trust him, to put herself in his hands, but there was a part of her that still held back. It wasn't just the fear of physical failure. Her concerns ran deeper. Nera's accident had robbed her of more than just her mobility. It had stolen her sense of autonomy, her sense of self-worth. Fixing her chair was one thing, but fixing her legs, giving her the ability to walk again, was something else entirely. It was a chance to reclaim a part of herself that she thought was gone forever. Terran understood that, perhaps better than she realized. He had never lost anything as significant as the ability to walk, but he had spent enough time working with people who had been broken in different ways. He knew what it took to rebuild someone from the ground up, both physically and emotionally. But this project, this human-alien collaboration, felt different. There was something more personal about it, something that stirred a sense of responsibility in him, a duty to make sure he didn't let her down. It was late on the third day of their project when Nera finally spoke up, breaking the silence that had enveloped them during their work. She had been sitting on a makeshift bench in Terran's workshop, watching him as he worked on the frame for her new prosthetic limbs. The sound of the tools clanking and the faint hum of the workshop's power systems was a constant background noise. But now, Nera's voice cut through it, bringing an unexpected shift in the air. "Terran," she began, her voice softer than usual, "do you ever feel like you're carrying someone else's burden? Like you're doing this, not for yourself, but for someone else?" Terran stopped working and turned to look at her, his brow furrowing slightly. There was something in her voice that made him pause. He had never thought of himself as carrying a burden, but he understood the question. He had been working tirelessly on her project, putting in hours that felt almost instinctive, driven by something he couldn't quite articulate. Maybe she was right. Maybe he was doing it for more than just the challenge. Maybe it was about fixing something beyond the mechanics, something inside. He leaned back against the workbench, crossing his arms as he considered her words. "Yeah, I think I get what you mean," he said after a moment, his voice thoughtful. "But it's not the same as carrying someone's burden. I think it's more like giving someone a chance to carry their own weight again. The way I see it, I'm helping you rebuild what was broken, not just physically, but mentally too." Nera's eyes met his, and for a moment, the world seemed to stand still between them. There was a quiet recognition in her gaze, a flicker of something unspoken, a shared understanding that transcended words. It wasn't just about fixing the prosthetics. It was about the promise of a second chance, of reclaiming what had been lost. "I don't know if I can ever walk like I used to," she admitted quietly, her voice laced with a mix of fear and hope. "But I want to try. For once, I want to feel like I'm not just a spectator in my own life." Terran smiled, a soft, reassuring smile that didn't reach for false promises. "You will. I'm not going to promise you everything will be easy, but I'm going to make sure you're better than you've ever been before." A new challenge awaits. As the days passed, the pieces of Nera's new prosthetic limbs slowly began to take shape. Terran worked with meticulous care, adjusting each component, testing and retesting the fit, ensuring that everything functioned as it should. The limbs were designed to be lightweight and incredibly durable, built with a combination of human ingenuity and the best of alien technology Terran had scavenged from the wreckage. The hydraulic systems were calibrated to respond with natural fluidity, and the integrated neural interface would allow Nera to control the limbs with a degree of precision that went beyond anything she had ever used. It was on the 7th day that they reached a significant milestone. The frame of the legs was finally complete, and Nera was about to take her first step in over a decade. The tension in the air was palpable as Terran carefully adjusted the neural interface to ensure the connection between the prosthetics and Nera's nervous system was seamless. Her green skin gleamed faintly in the dim light of the workshop, her violet hair falling loosely around her face as she sat, poised on the edge of the bench, ready to begin the next phase of her journey. "Ready?" Terran asked, his voice steady but full of quiet anticipation. Nera nodded, her gaze focused, unwavering. "Let's do this." With a final glance at Terran, she slowly placed one foot on the ground, the weight of her body shifting as the prosthetic limb responded instantly. The servos in the limb hummed to life, and for a moment, it felt like the entire room held its breath. She hesitated for a second, as if waiting for the familiar sensation of failure, but instead, she felt the support, the strength, the smooth motion of the leg carrying her weight. Slowly, she stood fully upright, the sound of the hydraulic system's subtle hiss the only noise in the workshop. A smile tugged at the corner of her lips. It wasn't perfect. There was still work to be done, still fine-tuning to be done. But it was a step, a real, honest-to-God step forward. Terran let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "How does it feel?" he asked, his eyes locked on hers, his voice hushed in awe. Nera took another step, more confidently this time, and her smile widened. "It feels like I'm walking again," she said softly, "like I'm whole again." Terran watched as she took a few more steps, the movement growing smoother with each one. His heart swelled with pride. But there was also something else, something deeper. This was more than just the success of his work. It was the realization that he had helped her reclaim a piece of herself that she had lost. He had helped her walk again, not just with her legs, but with her life. "I knew you had it in you," Terran said with a grin. Nera stopped and turned to face him, her eyes glistening with something unspoken. She didn't say anything at first, but then she simply nodded. "Thank you, Terran," she whispered, her voice thick with gratitude. Terran looked at her, his expression serious, but a smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. "This is just the beginning, Nera. There's more to fix, and we've got a long way to go. But for now, you're walking, and that's all that matters."